In the quiet corners of the world, hidden behind the anonymity of small towns and sprawling cities, there are stories that refuse to be explained. Stories that baffle and confuse, leaving behind nothing but fear and unanswered questions. This is one of those stories. Meet Sarah Thompson, a woman who thought she was simply checking into a quiet, unassuming hotel. What she would experience, however, would leave her questioning everything she knew about reality. It was a cold winter evening when Sarah arrived at the Whispering Pines Hotel, a place she had never heard of before. She was on a business trip, looking for some rest and a few quiet hours before her meeting the next morning. As she entered the lobby, the hotel felt oddly deserted. A quiet hum filled the air, the type that seemed to settle into the walls themselves. The lobby was small but clean, and the decor was outdated, as though time had frozen here many years ago. The receptionist, an older man, greeted her with a stiff, forced smile, one that seemed oddly rehearsed, as if he were trying too hard to appear welcoming. "You're in room 210, ma'am. The elevator is just over there." Sarah noticed the odd behavior. She had checked into plenty of hotels before, but the man's actions felt off. His eyes darted away from hers, and his hand trembled slightly as he handed her the key. She briefly wondered if he was just tired or unwell, but she quickly dismissed the thought, her mind already focused on getting to her room. The elevator was small and creaked with every movement. The flickering overhead light buzzed intermittently, casting strange shadows on the polished floors. The air inside felt stale, like it hadn't been properly ventilated in years. Sarah pushed the button for the second floor, and as the doors closed, the sound of the elevator's mechanism rattling in her ears created a sense of unease she couldn't shake. The second floor, she would later learn, was where most of the hotel's strange happenings had been reported. But that night, Sarah had no idea. The elevator's slow journey upwards seemed to stretch far longer than she expected, and for some reason, she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The entire building felt off. The feeling of being watched, the nagging sensation of unease that grew with every floor. The second floor hallway was even quieter than the lobby. It stretched far longer than it should have, and the lights overhead flickered erratically, casting strange shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. The air was thick with dust, as if it hadn't been disturbed in ages. Each step she took down the long corridor seemed to make the hallway feel even longer, as if the walls were shifting, stretching farther into an unknowable distance. There was a door at the end, room 210, the one she had been assigned. But she couldn't shake the odd feeling that the hall seemed endless. Room 210 was exactly as she'd imagined it would be, a simple hotel room with a bed, a desk, and a small window. But there was something about it that unsettled her. The bed was impeccably made, the curtains drawn just so, and the carpet was pristine. Everything felt untouched, too pristine. The air was cold, uncomfortably cold, like someone had just opened a window, though no window was open. She dropped her bag onto the bed and glanced around the room, noticing there was no television. Odd for a hotel, but not completely out of the question. Still, she felt as if she were being watched, as if the room itself was aware of her presence. It wasn't long before Sarah began to hear strange noises. At first, it was just a faint tapping, a light rapping, almost like fingernails against wood. But the sound was coming from all directions. She turned her head to the window, but it was shut tight, with no sign of wind. Her heart started to race as the sound grew louder, more insistent. She pulled the covers up tighter around her, trying to convince herself it was just the wind or the building settling. But the tapping didn't stop. It grew louder, like someone or something was trying to get inside. She couldn't ignore it any longer. The sound was relentless, and it seemed to be coming from the walls themselves. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to get up, to leave, but her legs felt like lead. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the door to the hallway. The same oppressive silence greeted her. The flickering lights overhead cast long, dancing shadows across the corridor. She stepped out cautiously, her footsteps echoing in the eerie stillness. The hallway seemed to stretch farther than it had when she first arrived, the walls narrowing as if closing in around her. The hallway stretched into the darkness, and the deeper she ventured, the more the sense of disorientation set in. The walls felt closer now, tighter. She kept walking, determined to find the source of the noise, but it was as if the hotel itself was playing tricks on her. When Sarah reached the end of the hall, her breath caught in her throat. A door stood before her, labeled Room 210. But this was not her room, she was certain of it. The door hadn't been there before. The hallway had twisted, and this room had materialized from nowhere. With her heart hammering in her chest, Sarah reached for the doorknob, the cold metal sending a chill through her fingers. When she opened the door, she gasped. Inside was a room identical to hers, perfectly arranged, no television, no desk, and that same chilling, uncomfortable stillness. Confusion set in. Was she trapped in a loop? Had she somehow entered a parallel version of her room? Panic surged as she turned to leave, but the hallway seemed different now. The walls were closing in on her, and the exit was nowhere to be found. Desperation set in as Sarah ran back down the hallway. The hotel's layout had shifted. Rooms appeared and vanished, and with each passing second, the hallway grew longer, darker, colder. The air was thick with something oppressive, like the hotel itself was alive, manipulating her every step. When Sarah finally reached the lobby, she was breathless, disoriented, and completely lost. The lobby, once full of life, was now eerily empty. The receptionist was gone. No sign of life remained. She looked around in horror, realizing that the hotel had erased her presence from its memory. The building, the rooms, the people, they were all gone. Without a second thought, Sarah fled into the cold night, the doors of the Whispering Pines Hotel swinging shut behind her. To this day, she has never returned, and she swears she will never forget the terror of being trapped in a hotel room that vanished before her very eyes. So, the next time you find yourself at an unfamiliar hotel, be careful where you stay, because sometimes the rooms aren't where they're supposed to be, and the hotel itself might have a mind of its own.